Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be exploring a fascinating selection of philosophical literature, um, really to trying to understand how writing shapes, philosophical thinking.
And of course, how those writings can offer insights into human nature and our place in the world.
Exactly, exactly. We'll be looking primarily at the introduction to masterpieces of philosophical literature published in March 2006.
It's a great overview of the field, and it will allow us to offer a taste of core ideas and lasting influence from, diverse thinkers and works.
Right, right. So it seemed like a perfect place to start our deep dive. And the introduction jumps right in with a quote from Wittgenstein. To imagine a language is to imagine a way of living.
It's a powerful statement, isn't it? Wittgenstein's suggesting that language isn't merely a tool for communication, it's intertwined with our existence. It shapes our perceptions, our interactions with the world. So when philosophers write, they're not just conveying ideas, they're actually engaging in a process of self-discovery, refining and clarifying their thoughts through language.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like the act of writing almost forces a higher level of precision and thought.
Precisely. And this process of writing that invites us as readers to engage in that same process of reflection and reinterpretation. It's not a passive activity.
Right. And the introduction uses a really interesting comparison to illustrate this point. It looks at Jesus's golden rule, which most people know, and then Kant's categorical imperative.
Yes, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is a model of simplicity and directness, a powerful message of empathy. But Kant, with his categorical imperative, kind of, dissects this seemingly straightforward principle.
So we ask, what constitutes good? And what are the underlying principles that should guide our actions, right?
Exactly. And his formulation, act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as a means only. Well, it forces a deeper analysis of the very foundations of ethical
It's
beliefs.
like taking a basic ethical concept and transforming it into this, multifaceted gem through philosophical writing.
Yes, exactly. And this act of reinterpretation, of building upon and refining previous ideas, is a defining characteristic of philosophical literature.
And the introduction gives some really great examples of this evolution of thought, the Vedas to the Upanishads in Indian philosophy, and the Analects of Confucius to the writings of Mencius.
It's an ongoing conversation, this constant refinement and reinterpretation that propels philosophical inquiry forward. And writing becomes the medium through which these conversations are preserved, revisited, and reinterpreted, really across generations.
So it's not just about the ideas themselves, but it's about the way they're shaped and reshaped through writing.
Exactly. So the introduction then digs into what actually constitutes philosophical literature, and it outlines three key characteristics.
The first is, obviously, rich philosophical content. These are works that address these fundamental questions about existence, knowledge, ethics, the nature of reality.
Right, but it's not just about the questions themselves, it's also about the mode of thinking, a particular way of approaching these inquiries.
So it's not just about stating ideas. It's about embodying a certain way of thinking, a methodology for philosophical inquiry.
Yes, precisely. A great example of that is Plato's allegory of the cave. It doesn't just state a philosophical concept, it actually invites the reader to experience the process of enlightenment through these vivid images and metaphors.
So it's using the power of storytelling as a tool for philosophical exploration.
Exactly. And finally, there's the element of enduring relevance. These works, they continue to resonate with readers centuries, even millennia after their creation. They tap into those fundamental aspects of the human condition that transcend time and cultural context.
So it's not just historical curiosity, it's about the ways that these works can offer valuable insights and perspectives for us today. And this brings us to the first work in the book, Plato's Republic, a cornerstone of Western philosophy.
It's much more than just an ancient Greek text. It's this blueprint for an ideal society, a thought experiment that continues to spark debate about justice, power, and the nature of reality.
It's interesting. The introduction aptly describes it as a blueprint, and it resonates as strongly today as it did centuries ago. So Plato structures the Republic as a dialogue, mainly between Socrates and various interlocutors.
And right from the start, in Book One, we're thrust into a heated debate about the nature of justice. Socrates is engaging with Thrasymachus, a sophist who argues that justice is merely in the interest of the powerful.
So, that's a pretty cynical perspective.
Hmm.
It almost suggests might makes right.
Yeah, It does. But Socrates meticulously dismantles this argument, ultimately concluding that justice for an individual is not about outcomes or personal gain, but it's rooted in this intrinsic sense of right and wrong.
So it forms the foundation for what we now know as virtue ethics, right? Like the idea that being good is inherently more important than just appearing good.
Exactly. And this sets the stage for the rest of the Republic, where Plato explores how this individual sense of justice can then be applied to the structure of an ideal society.
And this leads into the myth of the metals, which I always find to be such a fascinating concept.
Oh, absolutely. It's an allegory for the social structure of Plato's ideal republic. Imagine a society where each person is born with a type of metal in their soul: gold, silver, or bronze.
So those with gold souls are the philosopher kings.
Exactly. They possess the wisdom and intellect to govern. Those with silver are the guardians. They are the courageous warriors who protect the city. And then those with bronze souls are the workers, the craftspeople and laborers who provide for society's material needs.
It seems like a rigid system, though. Is an individual's place in society completely predetermined by, the metal they're born with?
Well, that's a central point of contention. Plato acknowledges that, individuals are complex. A gold soul might give birth to a bronze child and vice versa. So
Yeah,
it's not about bloodlines. It's about identifying and nurturing an individual's true nature.
I see. So it's more about recognizing potential, even if it doesn't perfectly align with the rigid social structure.
Precisely. It's about finding the role that best suits each individual's talents and abilities. And this kind of leads into another fascinating and somewhat radical aspect of the Republic, Plato's proposition for social engineering. He suggests that, in this ideal society, family ties and private property should be abolished.
To achieve true justice and harmony.
Right. It certainly generated a lot of discussion and debate. Some see it as a blueprint for totalitarianism. Others view it as more of a thought experiment, pushing the boundaries of what an ideal society could look like.
Yeah, it definitely challenges our fundamental assumptions about how society should be organized. And all this exploration of justice and societal structures leads to what is probably one of the most famous metaphors in all of philosophy, the parable of the cave.
It's a brilliant illustration of the philosopher's journey towards enlightenment, contrasting this illusory world of appearances with the world of true knowledge. So imagine a group of prisoners chained inside a cave their whole lives. Their only reality is the shadows projected on the wall, cast by objects passing in front of a fire.
And they perceive those shadows as reality itself.
Exactly. However, one prisoner escapes. He ventures into the sunlight and experiences the world as it truly is for the first time.
I imagine that would be jarring and disorienting, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. Initially, he's blinded by the light, but gradually he adjusts. He comes to understand that those shadows were mere illusions.
Wow. So this prisoner, having seen the true nature of reality, then returns to the cave to share his newfound knowledge with the others, right?
Yes, he does. But they don't believe him. In fact, they ridicule him, even threaten him for challenging their understanding of reality.
Well, it seems like that challenge of convincing others of a maybe unsettling truth is something that persists even today.
It certainly does. The parable of the cave highlights the courage and resilience required to pursue and share truth, even in the face of resistance.
It makes you think about the ways that we might be clinging to our own shadows, our own limited perspectives, without even realizing it.
It's a powerful image, and it speaks to the enduring power of Plato's work.
The Republic is truly a masterpiece, packed with ideas that make you think critically about justice, society, and knowledge. And it seems to reveal new layers of meaning each time you read it.
It's a testament to the power of philosophical writing to engage with these fundamental questions across generations. And from that world of perfect forms and shadows, we move to another fascinating figure, St. Augustine, and his introspective journey in the Confessions. It's this incredible work that bridges the classical and medieval worlds. Augustine grapples with some huge questions: the nature of God, the human soul, his own struggles with faith and reason. And it's considered one of the first true autobiographies, exploring his inner world with remarkable depth.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how he details his early life, his rebellious youth, and his attraction to Manichaeism with its, dualistic view of the world.
Right, this idea of good and evil locked in this cosmic battle. His mother, Monica, a devout Christian, she never gave up hope for his conversion.
I can only imagine how much she must have prayed for him.
And throughout his youth, Augustine is wrestling with fundamental questions about good and evil, truth, meaning. He was obviously brilliant, a gifted student, skilled rhetorician, but he felt this inner emptiness.
Like he was searching for something deeper beyond just worldly success.
Exactly. And his encounter with Cicero's philosophical writings ignited in him this lifelong passion for philosophy, but he initially dismissed scripture. He found it too simple compared to the intellectual stimulation of Cicero.
So that's where Manichaeism, with its emphasis on asceticism and purification, appealed to him.
It did, at least for a while. It provided a structure for his intellectual curiosity and his yearning for some kind of spiritual clarity. But as time went on, Augustine began to question those Manichaean beliefs, particularly their cosmology and explanations for things like astrology.
And then there was that story about him seeking out Faustus, this prominent Manichaean bishop, hoping for deeper insights.
Right, but he was completely let down. It was a turning point for Augustine. It led him to seek answers elsewhere. He moves to Rome, becomes a professor of rhetoric, but that inner turmoil doesn't go away.
So it's in Milan, under the influence of Bishop Ambrose, that he encounters Neoplatonism. And that's where we start to see a major shift in his thinking.
A pivotal moment. Neoplatonism, with its emphasis on the One as the source of all being and goodness, offered him a much more satisfying explanation for the world and his place within it.
And he found himself drawn to the Gospel of John and the writings of Paul, which resonated with this newfound Neoplatonic understanding.
Especially the story of Victorinus, another prominent rhetorician who, after years of defending pagan beliefs, converts to Christianity. Augustine probably saw a reflection of his own struggles in that story.
So after a prolonged period of this internal struggle, we come to his famous conversion in a garden in Milan, such a vividly depicted moment in the Confessions.
This incredibly powerful experience, he describes hearing a child's voice saying, "Take up and read." He opens the scriptures randomly and lands on a passage from Romans that just pierces his soul.
It's a moment of surrender, of letting go of resistance, of embracing the faith that had been drawing him in.
And what joy this must have brought to his mother, Monica. All those years of prayer. They even share a mystical experience in Ostia described as this pure bliss, a true communion with the divine. But then we have Monica's illness and death.
A harsh reminder that even in the midst of spiritual awakening, life is still filled with sorrow and loss.
Absolutely. But Confessions is so much more than just a personal story. It's a deep spiritual and philosophical exploration of those fundamental questions that we all wrestle with.
The questions about what it means to be human.
And it's structured as this extended prayer, a conversation between Augustine and God. He uses these literary techniques that create this incredible sense of immediacy, like we're right there with him, listening in on his personal dialogue.
It's such a unique blend of autobiography, philosophy, and theology.
And he grapples with so many themes: memory, time, creation, the interpretation of scripture, themes that continue to resonate with readers today. Augustine invites us to contemplate our own journeys, our doubts, our pursuit of truth. It's powerful stuff.
So those first 9 books of the Confessions cover his life up to his mother's death. And then the remaining 4 books are a bit different, right? They become more philosophical.
Yes, exactly. He delves into memory, time, eternity. It all culminates in his reflections on creation in Genesis.
Which he interprets through his Neoplatonic lens.
Right. Creation as an emanation from the One, goodness flowing down from the ultimate source. And this leads to his understanding of evil, not as this independent force, but as a lack of goodness, as privation, a concept rooted in Neoplatonism.
That's such a different take from the Manichaean dualism he'd grappled with earlier. It offers this more nuanced and maybe even more hopeful perspective on good and evil.
And it's fascinating how Augustine uses his own story as a kind of allegory for these bigger philosophical and theological concepts.
Like our individual journeys, struggles, triumphs, can be understood as reflections of these larger universal truths. It's a really powerful idea.
It is. Confessions is this testament to the ability of philosophical literature to connect with us on a deeply personal level, to make us question our own beliefs and experiences.
It really is a journey of self-discovery and a powerful testament to the power of faith. So from Augustine's very internal journey, we transition to this epic outward journey in Dante's Divine Comedy, a literal voyage through hell, purgatory, and paradise.
This is the heart of medieval literature, a world of symbolism, allegory, and a sense of the divine order.
And the introduction really highlights how Dante's work is both so deeply medieval and yet surprisingly modern at the same time.
It's incredible how he manages that. It's rooted in the specifics of his world, 14th century Florence, its politics and society, but it transcends all that too. The exploration of love, loss, sin, redemption, the search for meaning.
It's something that readers still connect with centuries later.
Yeah.
It's a journey of transformation.
Yes, and let's talk about Dante himself for a moment. He was born in Florence in 1265, a poet, scholar, political figure, caught up in all the turmoil of the time.
And eventually exiled from Florence, right?
Yes, in 1302. Because of his political affiliations, he was banished and never allowed to return. That experience of exile really informs the whole Divine Comedy.
So the journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise, it mirrors his own experience of loss and suffering, and also that yearning for redemption.
Exactly. And he uses his own story to explore those universal themes: sin, punishment, the possibility of spiritual growth. And he structures the Divine Comedy as a journey through these three realms, each with its own challenges but also its rewards.
The first realm being, of course, Inferno, a terrifying descent into hell, guided by the Roman poet Virgil.
Virgil represents human reason in this context, classical wisdom, the pinnacle of what we can achieve through intellect, but inherently limited in understanding the divine.
So he can guide Dante through hell and purgatory, but he can't lead him to paradise.
Right, he'll need another guide for that. Each circle of hell corresponds to a different category of sin, and the punishments are meant to fit those transgressions.
It's like a medieval morality play come to life. Dante encounters all these historical figures and mythical creatures, each embodying different vices.
It's vivid and imaginative, but it's not just about watching the horrors of hell. It's about confronting the consequences of our choices and acknowledging the need for repentance.
And then in purgatory, we see the process of purification. The souls struggling to rid themselves of their attachments to earthly things, to make themselves ready for paradise.
Purgatory is a place of hope. It represents the possibility of redemption, the potential for spiritual change.
And then finally he reaches paradise, guided by Beatrice, his muse, the symbol of divine love.
Beatrice represents grace, divine intervention. Paradise is depicted as pure light, pure joy, the ultimate union with God that transcends all earthly suffering.
So the Divine Comedy is ultimately this story of transformation, a testament to the power of faith and a profound exploration of what it means to be human.
It challenges us to confront our flaws, to strive for growth, to find meaning even in a world that can feel chaotic and meaningless.
And Dante's use of language is just incredible. The imagery, the allegory, it all pulls you into the story and allows you to experience these profound themes.
It's a work that reminds us of those things that connect us across time and cultures, the things that make us human.
Now let's move from the medieval world to the Renaissance. We come to Thomas More's Utopia, which really sparked centuries of debate about the nature of an ideal society.
This is where we see the rise of humanism, the rediscovery of classical learning, the struggle between individual liberty and social order.
And More himself was such a complex figure, a scholar, lawyer, friend of Erasmus, and eventually Lord Chancellor to Henry VIII.
His Utopia is this fascinating thought experiment, a satire of the problems in European society and a vision for a radically different way of life.
It's considered one of the first true works of utopian literature, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It depicts this island nation with customs and institutions that are completely at odds with what More saw in his own time.
And it's important to understand utopia within the context of Renaissance humanism, right?
Absolutely. This was a time of huge intellectual and cultural shifts, renewed interest in classical learning, questioning of traditional authority.
Thinkers like Erasmus, with his focus on Christian humanism and his work on the Bible, were incredibly influential during this period.
And More was right there in the middle of it all, trying to figure out the relationship between faith, reason, and this pursuit of a better, more just society.
And Utopia itself is structured as a dialogue, which is interesting.
It is, and that first book is all about this debate. What should the role of a humanist advisor be in the often corrupt world of European monarchs?
I see, and that reflects More's own struggle with serving Henry VIII.
It does. He saw the chance for positive change, but he was also aware of the moral compromises that came with being close to power.
So there's this tension between idealism and pragmatism that runs through the whole work.
Exactly. And then in book 2, we're introduced to Raphael Hythloday. He's this fictional traveler who's visited Utopia.
And his name itself, Hythloday, it means speaker of nonsense, which hints at the satirical nature of the work.
It does. It's like More is inviting us to question everything we think we know about society.
So what are some of the key features of this utopian society?
Well, first, there's radical equality. Everyone works, contributes to the common good, and there's no private property.
Such a contrast to the Europe of that time.
It is, and that commitment to equality extends to education, healthcare, and even religious tolerance.
Religious tolerance in the 16th century, that's remarkable.
It really is. It shows More's humanist ideals. His belief that a just society needs respect for individual conscience, for freedom of thought.
But it's not all perfect, right? There are still some pretty strict rules.
True. Premarital sex, adultery, those are met with harsh punishment. Divorce is only allowed in extreme cases, and their foreign policy, well, it's pretty ruthless. Espionage, manipulation.
So even a utopia has its dark side. A reminder that the pursuit of perfection doesn't always lead to the best outcomes.
Right. And that's the question, isn't it? Was more serious about this kind of society. Some see it as a blueprint, others as a satire, a critique of human nature itself.
It's that idea that we can imagine perfection, but it's almost impossible to achieve in reality.
Exactly. And the introduction points out that the concept of happiness, or felicitas, is really central to utopia.
How so?
More blends Epicurean and Stoic thought. He creates a vision of happiness that's based on virtue, community, harmony with nature.
So it's not about pleasure or wealth, but about living a meaningful life in accordance with reason.
Exactly. That's reflected in the social structure of utopia. Communal living, education, rejection of luxury. More is asking us to rethink our priorities.
To consider what a truly good life looks like.
Right. Utopia is this ongoing conversation, a challenge to our assumptions. It makes us question the status quo, and it inspires us to imagine a better future.
A powerful legacy for a book written so long ago. It really is. Now, moving on to the Enlightenment, we come to Voltaire and his satirical masterpiece, Candide. This work takes aim at philosophical optimism and the absurdity of, well, being human.
Voltaire was such a key figure in the 18th century, this witty, skeptical mind, championing reason, battling against injustice.
A true polymath. And Candide is his most enduring work. It's this philosophical tale that uses humor and irony to expose the follies of his time.
And the heart of it all is Candide, a young man who truly believes this is the best of all possible worlds, an idea that his tutor, Dr. Pangloss, has drilled into him.
And Pangloss, of course, is this caricature of the philosopher Leibniz. Voltaire is poking fun at these abstract systems of thought that ignore the reality of suffering.
So Candide goes on this journey, and it's one disillusionment after another, wars, disasters, betrayal, but he still clings to Pangloss's optimism.
He does. He's a sympathetic character, but also the target of Voltaire's satire. It's like Voltaire saying, look how ridiculous blind optimism is in the face of reality. Right. And then there are other characters who offer these contrasting perspectives.
Yes, you have Martin, the cynical scholar who believes the world is just inherently corrupt, and the old woman who, despite all she's endured, maintains a kind of stoic resilience.
They represent different ways of seeing the world, challenging Candide's naive optimism.
Exactly. They force him to confront the complexity of human experience. Voltaire's not advocating for either extreme, though.
It seems more like he's pushing for a pragmatic realism, accepting that life has both good and bad.
Right, a nuanced view. The introduction highlights how Candide ultimately delivers this message of tolerance, skepticism, and a recognition of the limits of reason.
Voltaire is telling us to think for ourselves, to question authority, to find meaning not in some abstract system, but in our lived experience. And there's that famous ending where Candide and his friends decide to cultivate their garden.
It's this pragmatic response to suffering, isn't it? It's not about utopia, it's about finding contentment in simple things, in creation and human connection.
Candide is such a timeless satire, a witty exploration of what it means to be human. It makes us laugh, but it also makes us think about our own beliefs, our own ways of making sense of the world.
Exactly. It reminds us to embrace complexity, to find joy even amidst the absurdity. And as we continue to explore these masterpieces, we're going to encounter even more perspectives, more insights into this complex thing we call being human. It really is amazing how he manages to make these ideas accessible, you know? You can grapple with these complex philosophical questions without being, bogged down in all that jargon.
He's a master storyteller. He weaves those explorations into these captivating narratives that draw you in.
Exactly. He lets you experience those ideas, not just read about them.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into philosophical literature, it's worth reflecting on just how far we've come. From how the act of writing itself shapes philosophical thought, to those bigger questions about meaning and existence.
We've seen how these works aren't just about content, but about a way of approaching those inquiries. a method, a process.
And they all have this timeless quality, something that speaks to us across centuries.
Like Augustine's Confessions, that intimate exploration of the self, that search for meaning, it still resonates today. And then Dante, taking us on this epic journey through hell, purgatory, paradise, confronting sin, exploring redemption.
And then through the Renaissance with More's Utopia, that challenge to our assumptions about society and happiness. Voltaire, with his Candide, forcing us to see the limits of reason, the absurdities of life.
Goethe's Faust, plumbing the depths of ambition and the consequences of our choices. And Kierkegaard with his Either-Or, confronting us with the anxieties of freedom, that responsibility of creating our own meaning.
And then Nietzsche, with his radical individualism, his will to power, urging us to strive for self-actualization. And Huxley, with his warning about the dangers of technology, of a world that sacrifices freedom for comfort.
And finally, we explored the labyrinthine worlds of Borges, delving into language, reality, the power of fiction. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And the key takeaway here is that philosophical literature gives us these incredible insights into what it means to be human. Insights that are as valid today as they ever were.
They remind us that those big questions, the search for meaning, for truth, for a good life, these are ongoing journeys, conversations that span generations.
So as we reach the end of our exploration, I think a really important question arises. In a world that's dominated by information, by technology, by this constant rush, how can we use these works to live more meaningful lives?
It's a great question to consider. I think these works encourage us to slow down, to step back from the noise and really reflect.
To think critically, to question our assumptions, and to make conscious choices about the path we want to take.
And they remind us that wisdom, truth, a virtuous life, these things take effort, they take engagement, they take a willingness to wrestle with the messy complexities of being human.
Absolutely. And I encourage everyone listening to seek these works out, engage with those ideas, let them spark your own journey of exploration and self-discovery.
There's a whole world of thought within those pages, just waiting to be uncovered. A world that can change the way you see yourself and the world around you.
And that's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive. Taking those deep dives, emerging with new insights, new perspectives, and a renewed sense of wonder. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those moments of wonder that make life truly worthwhile.